Good morning, everybody, and welcome to what is an extremely wet day in the otherwise warmly sunny Perth. It's actually been raining now for about an hour, which is very unusual. We normally get downpours for about 5 minutes, and then it dries up again. So, yes, a very wet day. Anyway, on to more interesting things. As I said in my post on the Facebook group for Tonic Audio the other day, that I completed another round of changes / upgrades to the preamplifier, and I thought I'd take you through those now, as I didn't make a video while I was doing it because I was too busy thinking about what I was doing. So yes, yet again the reveal looks a bit different inside now. So here we are. Probably the most obvious thing is the copper bar running across the top here, and that is basically allowing me to support two higher capacitors that were built into than the ones built into the power supply as I received it. So that's the first thing, but let's go back to what I've been talking about before. And that was in an attempt to reduce noise levels as much as possible. I reasoned that having a completely separate transformer for the controls and switching, I should buy a little transformer. And in fact, I ended up getting it from Radio Spares, 15 volt per amp, 15 watt transformer, which is this rather small thing here. Paralleling the two secondaries gives me enough addressable level of current to the original transformer on that particular tap. But once I got it, it took me forever to reorganize the wiring. In fact, I think I spent nearly a whole day on what probably should have taken about half an hour. Anyway, it's done now. So as you can see, there's a white band round about the transformer. As it was supplied, there was no sort of shielding on the transformer. Shielded transformer was a good deal more expensive. However, when I went through my spares, I found that I had an air-like transformer which had the steel band round it, which I think they call a Gauss band, I'm not sure. And I took that off the air-link transformer and wound it around the outside of the new transformer in the preamp after I'd taped it up to hold its shape and to provide insulation. So that should cut down to a certain degree radiated noise from the additional transformer. So I got that done, plugged it all in, and there was a terrible hum coming from it. Now, I'd been pretty careful in making sure that I'd done the wiring correctly. But in disassembling the preamp, I'd actually, for the first time, taken the display board off. I did this to turn the power input, AC power input terminal through 180 degrees because it was facing down towards the actual aluminium chassis, which seemed like a bad idea. Having done that, I found that the actual nuts that were holding the display in place were very loose and couldn't be tightened because they just drilled a hole and sort of pushed these things into them. So I ended up gluing them in place with some super glue, which provided nice insulation between the board and the chassis, which I'm assuming was the reason for hum, because the board was no longer grounded. Looking carefully at the board, there were ground points on it, and so I connected those and ran an earth cable right back to the star earthing point here on the chassis. That eliminated the hum. I decided while I had the unit apart that I would have a look at the power supplies, simply because I had removed every other board in the unit before, but I hadn't actually bothered to remove the power supplies. And I discovered that the transistors, those 2 transistors per board, at least the ones that are bolted to the chassis, well, they were bolted to the chassis, but very, very loosely, with no lock washers, and there was no heatsink paste or goop whatever you want to call it, between the transistors and the chassis. And that would have meant that there wouldn't be a particularly good heat transfer away from the transistors. And of course, the lack of lock washer could have meant that over time, those transistors would have loosened up, leading to the power supply, one or a t'other of the power supplies dying. So I remedied all those problems, and then I thought, I wonder what would happen if I increased the size of the capacitors. Now, the capacitors that were used in the power supplies were Nichicon, I can't remember, Feingold, maybe. Relatively, let me have a look, I've got one here. Puts glasses back on. FW, these are pretty much, where are we? These are pretty much the standard and good quality Nichicon audio capacitors, but I had some of the Feingold, the FGs, which are their best quality power supply capacitors. And actually the first lot that I came across had exactly the same values. I put those in and really couldn't detect a great deal of difference in sound. If anything, I suppose the sound was poorer, didn't seem to be quite as tuneful as it had been before. So when it came to, after I'd had listened to it for a while, I decided to take those capacitors out, and I found some much larger Nichicon capacitors, Feingold capacitors, 10,000 microfarads instead of the original 4.5, and I decided to pop those in and have a listen. These are too big to sit on the actual board, so they do require short twisted leads to connect the capacitors, and I started off with capacitors just sitting on the chassis, but that isn't a long-term proposition because wires can break, and you can get all sorts of issues about that. Again, going through my box of bits and pieces, or my many boxes of bits and pieces, I found this spar, which is actually originally from a rather expensive Toshiba DVD player that wasn't working, and I eventually used the case for it for something else. But this spar here allowed me to clamp the capacitors in place in close proximity to the power supply board, so I could keep the leads from the capacitors to the capacitor input on the board as short as possible. So, having done all that and taking it back into the music room, I actually was rewarded with a rather nice increase in sound quality. It's difficult to explain exactly how it was different. It just sounded, well, more correct, but the sound was more relaxed, but still very tuneful. I can't say that there was any difference in noise levels because of the increase in capacitance, and really quite often if you increase the size of the capacitors in a power supply you get better bass performance, but then generally that's in power amplifiers. This is a preamplifier, and I couldn't really tell any difference in the depth and power of the bass, but the sound quality was just easier on the ear, more correct. As I said, it's difficult to describe. It just sounds more right, as if the preamplifier is getting more out of the way of the music signal. So that's basically where that's at. I had left it on all day yesterday while I was listening to it, and it's all running properly. And I think really this is us at the end point of making modifications to this preamp. Next stage will be to buy one of these boards. Now you can buy just the board, you can buy the board with all the capacitors, transistors, resistors, etc. And I'm probably going to buy one of the kits that comes with all the parts needed for the line stage board, and substitute in known quality parts. I mean, given the sound of the preamplifier, I really think these are probably genuine Nichicon FW. I don't know the provenance of the tantalum capacitors or the Styroflex, Styroseal capacitors. Performance is good, but one thing I did notice in measuring the DC offsets on the output of the preamplifier is that one channel is very low at 0.02 millivolts, and the other one's quite high at 0.4 millivolts. There's no hum detectable on the outputs, but I'm sort of reasoning that one of the issue could be, excuse me, the issue could be that the transistors were not particularly carefully matched, and that's supposed to be very important in this particular design. So what I'll do, the transistors are fairly inexpensive, is I'll buy a batch of those and match them using my test meter, and buy the rest of the capacitors either locally from radio spares and resistors, capacitors and resistors, either locally from radio spares, or I'll get them from Parts Connection in Canada, who offer great service with a wide range of parts at very reasonable cost. So there we are, that's it for just now. Probably the next video I'm going to do will be about the basic tools you need to get started in building kits or modifying things. So it'll be a semi-introduction to video to the channel after having posted about 5 or 6 videos. There you go. That's it for now, guys. Please remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for the channel, and also to like this video. Thanks, bye.